The mountain man's hand slammed gold onto the altar, silencing 200 people in an instant. Abigail Rowe stood frozen on the auction block, her body displayed like merchandise while drunk ranchers placed bids on her future. The most powerful man in Montana sat grinning in the front row, certain he'd already won. But then the church doors exploded inward, and a scarred giant nobody had seen in 5 years strode through the crowd like judgment itself. What happened next would destroy an empire, expose decades of murder, and prove that the woman they mocked as weak would become the one thing Cedar Hollow's corrupt elite feared most. Free. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The January wind cut through Cedar Hollow like a knife through rotted meat, and Abigail Rowe had stopped shivering 2 hours ago. That was the dangerous part. Her father had taught her that. When you stop feeling the cold, your body's already started the process of shutting down. She stood in the anteroom behind the Cedar Hollow Community Church, wearing a cream-colored dress that had belonged to her mother. The fabric was too thin for Montana winter, but that was the point. Sheriff Marcus Doyle had been very specific in his instructions. Light colors, no shawls, no coats. The men needed to see what they were bidding on. "You gonna cry again?" The voice belonged to Ruth Calloway, the auctioneer's wife. She was a hard woman with harder eyes, the kind who'd survived frontier life by becoming meaner than it was. She stood in the doorway holding a hairbrush like a weapon. "No, ma'am." Abigail's voice came out steady. "Small victory." "Good. Crying makes your face blotchy. Men don't pay premium for blotchy." Ruth moved behind her, yanking the brush through Abigail's dark hair without gentleness. "Though in your case, I don't suppose it matters much." Abigail said nothing. She'd learned that lesson 3 weeks ago when they'd come for her father's store. Talking back just made things worse. Through the thin wall, she could hear the church filling up. Male voices, mostly. Laughter. The scrape of boots on wood floors. Someone was already drunk. She could hear the slurred syllables, the too loud boasting. "How much you think a big girl like you goes for?" Ruth asked, conversational now. "Maggie Sullivan went for $300 last month. Of course, Maggie's got that tiny waist, and she's blonde. Men like blondes. $300. The number sat in Abigail's stomach like spoiled food. $300 was what her father's life amounted to. $300 was the price of a decent horse. She was worth less than a horse. "My father didn't owe Silas Granger anything," Abigail said quietly. "Those debts were forged." Ruth's hand cracked across her face so fast Abigail didn't see it coming. Her cheek exploded in hot pain. "Your father was a thief and a drunk," Ruth said, voice flat. "And you'll keep that mouth shut unless you want me to tell Mr. Granger you've been spreading lies about him. You understand what happens to girls who make trouble?" Abigail understood. She'd understood perfectly well when they'd found Sarah Mackenzie's body in the river last fall. Sarah had made trouble. Sarah had refused to marry the man who'd won her at auction. Sarah had tried to run. They'd called it an accident. Everyone knew better. "Yes, ma'am," Abigail whispered. "That's more like it." Ruth set the brush down, examining her work with the critical eye of someone appraising livestock. "Well, you got a pretty enough face, I suppose, if a man don't mind the rest of you." The rest of her. Abigail was 25 years old, 5'6", and carried the soft, curving body that her mother had called substantial, and the town called far less kind things. She'd spent most of her life trying to take up less space, to be quieter, smaller, less noticeable. It hadn't worked. "They're ready for you," Ruth said. "Walk straight, don't slouch. And for mercy's sake, try to smile. Nobody wants to buy a woman who looks like she's headed for a funeral." The main chapel was packed. Abigail stepped through the side door and the noise hit her like a physical thing. 200 people, maybe more. The church was standing room only, men pressed shoulder to shoulder along the walls. She could smell whiskey and tobacco and unwashed bodies and something else underneath it all. Something hungry. The temperature in the room spiked. All those bodies in one space, all that attention focused on the stage where Reverend Thomas stood beside a small wooden platform. Not a pulpit, an auction block. "Gentlemen," Reverend Thomas raised his hands, "and ladies, welcome to this month's bride auction, conducted under the full authority of Montana Territory Law and the Cedar Hollow Town Charter. Abigail's eyes swept the crowd, looking for a friendly face. There were none. Mrs. Henderson, who used to buy books from her father's store, sat in the third row between her husband and grown son. She wouldn't meet Abigail's eyes. Mayor Pritchard stood against the back wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. And there, in the very front row, sat Silas Granger. He was 53 years old, silver-haired, dressed in an expensive suit that had come all the way from San Francisco. He owned half the land in the territory and controlled most of the rest through debt and intimidation. When her father had started investigating Granger's business practices 6 months ago, people had warned him to stop. Her father hadn't stopped. Now her father was dead, and Abigail stood on an auction block wearing her dead mother's dress. Granger smiled at her. It was a pleasant smile, the kind a man might give a clever dog that had learned a new trick. Our first lot this afternoon, Reverend Thomas continued, is Miss Abigail Rowe, age 25, recently orphaned. Miss Rowe comes with her father's remaining property, specifically a commercial building on Main Street currently valued at $400. That building was worth $3,000, and everyone in the room knew it, but debt had a way of changing valuations. Miss Rowe is literate, numerate, and experienced in bookkeeping and retail management. She is of sound health and good moral character. Someone in the back laughed. The sound cut through the room like breaking glass. "Let's see what we're buying, Thomas," a voice called out. "Walk forward, Miss Rowe," Reverend Thomas said quietly. Abigail's legs didn't want to move. She forced them anyway, one foot in front of the other, climbing the 3 steps onto the platform. The room got quieter. "Turn around," Thomas said. She turned, slow, feeling every eye on her body. The cream dress felt transparent. She could hear whispers starting, the low murmur of men assessing, judging, calculating. "Well, she ain't much to look at," someone said, loud enough to carry. "Got some meat on her, though. Good for birthing. If you can find what you're looking for under all that..." Laughter drowned out the rest. Abigail's face burned. She stared at the back wall of the church, at the plain wooden cross hanging there, and tried to disappear inside her own head. This wasn't happening. This was a nightmare. She would wake up, and her father would be alive, and none of this would be real. "Gentlemen, please." Reverend Thomas sounded almost apologetic. "Let's maintain some decorum. Do I hear an opening bid?" $50, someone called. $50, thank you. "Do I hear 75? 75, another voice said. "But I want to inspect the merchandise first." "That's not procedure," Thomas started. "It is now," Silas Granger said. He stood, and the room went silent. Granger moved like a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. He climbed onto the platform, circling Abigail like a buyer examining a horse. She could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. "Look at me, girl," he said softly. She looked at him. "Your father stole from me," Granger said, conversational. "He stole records, ledgers, private correspondence. Then he spread malicious lies about my business practices." "That's not true," Abigail whispered. "You calling me a liar?" Every person in the church was watching, waiting. "No, sir," Abigail said. "That's better." Granger reached out and caught her chin in his hand, tilting her face up toward the light. "You got your mother's eyes. She was a pretty woman, your mother, before she got sick." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "I'll bid 300, Granger said, addressing the room now. "And I'll waive the remaining debt on the store property. Call it an act of Christian charity." $300, Reverend Thomas sounded relieved. "Going once." "You don't have to do this," Abigail said. She was talking to the whole room now, voice shaking but audible. "This is illegal. Territorial law says women can be sold to cover family debts," Granger interrupted. "It's all very legal, Miss Rowe. Your father's signature is on the documents." "My father never signed anything." "Going twice," Thomas said. "Please," Abigail heard herself begging now, hated herself for it. "Someone, anyone, this isn't right." No one moved. Mrs. Henderson looked at her lap. Mayor Pritchard studied his fingernails. "Going 3 times." The church doors exploded inward. The sound was like a cannon blast, wood and iron slamming against stone walls with enough force to make the windows rattle. Every head in the room spun toward the entrance. A man stood in the doorway. Not just a man. A mountain. He was 6'4" at least, built like he'd been carved from granite and violence. He wore a heavy coat covered in trail dust, pants tucked into scarred boots, and a hat that shadowed most of his face. But Abigail could see the beard, dark and unkempt, could see the scar that ran from his left eye down to his jaw, could see the gun on his hip. "Auction's closed," the man said. His voice was gravel and winter wind and something that might have been fury held on a very short leash. "Sir, this is private property," Reverend Thomas started. The man walked forward. People scrambled out of his way like he was on fire. A path cleared through the packed church, men pressing themselves against the walls to avoid being in his path. Abigail knew who he was. Everyone in Cedar Hollow knew who he was. Boone Callahan, the ghost of Copper Ridge. Murderer. Outlaw. The monster parents threatened their children with when they misbehaved. He climbed onto the platform, and Silas Granger actually took a step backward. "Callahan," Granger said, "you're a wanted man. You got no business." Boone Callahan reached into his coat. Half the men in the room went for their guns. He pulled out a leather bag and slammed it onto the altar beside Reverend Thomas. The bag split. Gold coins spilled across the white cloth like a hemorrhage. "That's $800, Boone said, "in Union gold. I'm buying her." The silence was absolute. "You can't just—" Granger started. Boone turned to face Abigail. His eyes were gray, storm gray, the kind of gray that meant serious weather coming. "You want to come with me?" he asked. It was the first time anyone had asked her what she wanted in 3 weeks. Abigail opened her mouth. No words came out. "They're going to sell you to him," Boone said, jerking his head toward Granger. "You know what happens then?" She knew. "Or you can come with me. Your choice." "She can't choose," Granger's voice rose. "The law." "The law says highest bidder wins," Boone interrupted. "That's me." "Unless you want to go higher." Granger's jaw worked. $800 was real money, more than Abigail was worth, more than any woman at auction was worth. It was an insult. It was also legally binding. "This is irregular," Reverend Thomas said weakly. "We'd need to verify the marriage immediately, and you're wanted for—" Boone Callahan cupped Abigail's face in both hands and kissed her. The room erupted. It wasn't a gentle kiss. Wasn't romantic. It was a claim, pure and simple, made in front of 200 witnesses. His lips were chapped and he tasted like coffee and trail dust and something wild. When he pulled back, Abigail's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "That legal enough for you?" Boone asked Thomas. That is, the territorial statute requires declaration before witnesses and physical consummation," Boone said flatly. "I just kissed my wife in front of half of Cedar Hollow. We can handle the consummation part later." Someone in the back started laughing. High, hysterical laughter that died when Boone turned to look. "Anyone object?" Boone asked the room. Nobody objected. His hand found Abigail's. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. "Come on," he said quietly. She went. Her legs moved automatically, following him down from the platform, through the crowd that parted like water. Behind her, she could hear Granger shouting something about legality and jurisdiction and territorial authority, but the words didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except the man's hand holding hers and the door getting closer and the sudden, dizzying realization that she was leaving. Outside, the cold hit her like a fist. There were 2 horses tied to the church fence, a big roan gelding and a smaller paint mare. "You ride?" Boone asked. "Not well." "Good enough." He boosted her onto the mare with shocking gentleness, then swung onto the roan. "Stay close. We got about 5 minutes before someone in there grows a spine." They rode. Abigail had lived in Cedar Hollow her entire life and never really seen it before. The main street, the shops, the houses all blurred together as they cantered past. A few people stared from windows. Most just watched them go. At the edge of town, Boone kicked the roan into a gallop. The mare followed. They rode hard for 20 minutes before Boone finally slowed, guiding them off the main road onto a narrow trail that climbed into the foothills. The sun was already starting to set, painting the snow-covered peaks orange and gold. "Where are we going?" Abigail asked. Her voice sounded strange in the open air. "Somewhere safe." "There's nowhere safe from Silas Granger." "There is," Boone said, "just not anywhere civilized." They rode in silence for another hour. The trail got steeper, narrower. Abigail's thighs burned from gripping the saddle. Her hands were numb despite the gloves Boone had given her. Finally, as full dark fell, they reached a clearing. The cabin was small, built from rough-cut logs and river stone. Smoke rose from the chimney. There were outbuildings, a small barn, a smokehouse, what looked like a root cellar built into the hillside. "This is it," Boone said. He dismounted and came around to help her down. Abigail's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. "Easy." His hand steadied her. "You did good. Most people can't handle that ride first time out." "I'm not most people," Abigail said. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "No, I don't suppose you are." Inside the cabin was warmer than expected. A fire burned in the stone fireplace. The main room was maybe 20 feet square, with a sleeping loft above and a small kitchen area in the back. Shelves lined one wall, shelves full of books. Abigail stared. "You read?" Boone asked. "My father owned a bookstore." "I know." He moved to the fireplace, adding wood. "Thomas Rowe. He sold me half those books. Good man. I was sorry when I heard." "You knew my father?" "Everyone knew your father. He was one of maybe 3 honest men in Cedar Hollow." Boone straightened. "He was investigating Granger when he died." "Granger had him killed." "I know." The simple acknowledgement hit harder than sympathy would have. Abigail sat down hard in the chair nearest the fire. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you buy me?" Boone was quiet for a long moment. "You remember the land wars, 8, 9 years back?" "I was young, but yes. Granger wanted my property. I wouldn't sell. So he manufactured a dispute, got the sheriff involved, turned it violent." His voice was flat, empty. "My wife was pregnant. 8 months. They came to the house while I was in town." Abigail's breath caught. "I found them when I got back," Boone continued. "Sarah and the baby. They didn't make it quick." "I'm sorry," Abigail whispered. "I killed 6 of Granger's men that night. Would have killed him too if he hadn't run to the territorial marshal. They declared me outlaw, put a price on my head. I've been up here ever since. Why help me?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Abigail saw something raw in those gray eyes. "Because I was in town when I heard about the auction, heard your name specifically, heard Granger was planning to buy you himself." He paused. "I couldn't save Sarah, couldn't save my daughter, but I could do something about you." "I'm not your wife," Abigail said quietly. "No, but you are legally married to me, and that means Granger can't touch you without starting a legal war he can't win. The marriage is binding as long as it's consummated." Heat flooded Abigail's face. "I won't." "I'm not asking you to." Boone's voice was gentle. "I got a spare bedroll. You can take the loft. But if anyone asks, we tell them the marriage is real in every way. Otherwise the contract's void and Granger gets you back." "Why would you do this for me?" "Because someone should have done it for Sarah," Boone said simply. "And because your father was a good man who died trying to expose a monster. Seems like the least I can do is keep his daughter alive." Abigail felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd been holding them back for weeks, refusing to cry, refusing to break. Now she broke. The sobs came hard and ugly, racking her whole body. She cried for her father, for the life she'd lost, for the terror of the auction and the humiliation and the helplessness of it all. Boone didn't try to comfort her, didn't tell her it would be okay. He just sat in the chair across from her and waited while she cried herself empty. When she finally stopped, he handed her a clean handkerchief. "You hungry?" he asked. The question was so normal, so ordinary, that Abigail almost started crying again. "Yes," she managed. "I got venison stew on the stove. Nothing fancy." They ate in silence. The stew was good, better than good. Rich and savory with vegetables she didn't recognize. "How long have you lived up here?" Abigail asked. 5 years. "About?" "Alone?" "Mostly. Few trappers come through in winter. Some of the northern Cheyenne use this valley for hunting." "Don't they mind you being here?" "We got an understanding. I stay out of their way. They stay out of mine." He paused. "They're better neighbors than most white folks, tell you the truth." "What will happen when Granger finds out where we are?" "He won't find us. Trail's too hard to follow in winter, and nobody in town knows exactly where this cabin is. Someone will talk, maybe, but it'll take time. By spring, the legal marriage will be established fact, harder to undo. Abigail set down her spoon. You've thought this through. Had to. It was the only way to get you out of there without starting a war I can't win. A war you'd fight anyway. He smiled, thin and humorless. Yeah, probably. The fire crackled. Outside, wind scraped branches against the cabin walls. I need you to understand something, Boone said. This ain't going to be easy. Mountain living is hard. Harder than anything you've done before. The cold will try to kill you. The animals will try to kill you. Hell, the land itself will try to kill you if you're not careful. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not talking about work. I'm talking about survival. You ever shot a gun? No. Skinned an animal? No. Hauled water in below freezing temperatures? No. Then you're not ready, Boone said flatly. But you're going to learn. Because come spring, if Granger sends men up here, I need to know you can defend yourself. I can learn. You'll have to do more than learn. You'll have to transform. He studied her across the table. That woman who stood on the auction block today? She can't survive up here, but someone stronger could. I'm not weak. Didn't say you were. Weak women don't stand up to Silas Granger in front of 200 witnesses, but there's a difference between brave and capable. Abigail lifted her chin. Then teach me. It's gonna hurt. I don't care. Something shifted in Boone's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right then, he said. We start tomorrow. That night, Abigail climbed into the loft and lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the cabin settling, the fire crackling below, Boone moving around the main room. She should have been terrified, should have been planning escape. Instead, for the first time in 3 weeks, she felt something that might have been hope. The woman on the auction block was gone. Someone else was waking up. Dawn came cold and gray, filtering through the gaps in the cabin walls like unwelcome truth. Abigail woke to the sound of splitting wood and the smell of coffee, so strong it could strip paint. Her body hurt everywhere. The ride up the mountain had used muscles she didn't know she had. Every movement felt like tearing through scar tissue. She sat up slowly, every joint protesting, and looked down from the loft. Boone was already dressed, standing at the stove with his back to her. Morning light caught the gray in his hair, made the scar on his jaw look deeper. Coffee's ready, he said without turning around. We got a lot to do today. Abigail climbed down the ladder, trying not to wince with each step. She failed. You're going to hurt worse tomorrow, Boone said. He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Day after that, you'll start getting used to it. The coffee was bitter and scalding. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. What are we doing today? She asked. Depends. Can you walk? Yes. Then we're starting with the basics. Water, wood, fire. Things you need to know to stay alive if something happens to me. What's going to happen to you? Nothing, if we're lucky. He pulled on his coat. But luck's got a short memory up here. Outside, the world was frozen. Snow covered everything in a blanket so white it hurt to look at. The sky was the color of old bruises, promising more weather coming. First lesson, Boone said. Water. He led her 50 yards down from the cabin to where a creek cut through the rocks. The water was running fast enough not to freeze completely, but ice crusted the edges. This is our water source. Every morning, you fill these. He indicated 2 wooden buckets sitting on the bank. Every evening, you fill them again, no exceptions. That doesn't seem hard. It's not hard when it's 20 degrees. It's hard when it's 0, and the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour, and you can't feel your fingers. He handed her the buckets. Fill them. Fill. Abigail took the buckets and moved to the creek's edge. The first one wasn't too bad. She dipped it in, felt the shock of cold water on her hands, pulled it up. It was heavier than she expected. Don't slosh, Boone said. Every drop you spill is a drop you got to come back and get later. The second bucket was worse. Her hands were already numb. Water slopped over the edge as she lifted it. Again, Boone said. What? Empty it. Do it again. This time, don't spill. It took her 6 tries to fill both buckets without losing water. By the time she succeeded, her hands were red and stiff. Now carry them back to the cabin. That was when Abigail learned what heavy really meant. Each bucket probably weighed 30 pounds. The path back uphill looked short but felt eternal. She made it maybe 15 feet before her arms started shaking. "Don't stop," Boone called from behind her. "You stop, you have to start over." She didn't stop. Her shoulders screamed. Her back felt like it was tearing in half. Water splashed onto her dress, soaking through to her skin, freezing almost instantly. She made it to the cabin door and set the buckets down so hard water jumped out and splattered her boots. "Not bad," Boone said. He hadn't helped her once. "You'll do that twice a day. Morning and evening, no matter what else is happening." Abigail stared at him. "That's insane. That's survival. You want to live up here? You need water. You want water. You carry it. Simple." "Nothing about this is simple." "No," he agreed, "but it's honest. Water don't lie to you. Cold don't pretend to be your friend. Mountain shows you exactly what it is. That's more than you can say for most people." He moved to the woodpile beside the cabin. Second lesson, wood. There was an axe buried in a splitting stump. Boone pulled it free and handed it to her. "You ever split wood before?" "No." "Figures." He set a log on the stump. "Watch." He took the axe back, raised it overhead, and brought it down in one smooth motion. The log split clean down the middle, both pieces falling away. "Your turn." Abigail took the axe. It was heavier than it looked. She set up a log the way he had, lifted the axe, swung. The blade hit off center and stuck in the wood without splitting it. "Again!" She wrenched the axe free, tried again. Same result. "You're muscling it," Boone said. "Stop trying to force it. Let gravity do the work. You just aim." It took her 20 tries to split her first log. By the time she'd split 10, her hands were blistered and her arms felt like dead weight hanging from her shoulders. "That's enough for today," Boone said. "I can do more." "You can hurt yourself is what you can do. Knowing when to stop is as important as knowing how to start." He took the axe from her. "Come on. You need food." Back inside, Boone fried salt pork and yesterday's cornbread. They ate without talking. Abigail was too tired to make conversation, and Boone didn't seem to need it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Doing what?" "Teaching me. You could have just, I don't know, let me stay here and cook and clean. That's what women do, isn't it?" Boone looked at her for a long moment. "I told you last night, if Granger sends men up here, I need you to be able to fight. Can't do that if you don't know how to survive first." "You think he'll really come?" "I know he will. Question is when." He pushed back from the table. "Which brings us to lesson 3. He pulled a rifle down from hooks above the door. It was well maintained, oiled, the wood stock worn smooth from use. "You're going to learn to shoot." The shooting lesson started that afternoon. Boone set up targets behind the cabin, old tin cans lined up on a fallen log at 20 yards. He showed her how to load the rifle, how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel. "Squeeze, don't pull," he said. "Pulling jerks the barrel. Just squeeze steady until it surprises you." Abigail's first shot went so wide she didn't even see where it hit. Again. Her second shot hit dirt 3 feet in front of the targets. "You're flinching. You know it's going to kick, so you're tensing up before you shoot. Stop thinking. Just breathe and squeeze." It took her 40 rounds before she hit her first can. The sound it made, that sharp metallic ping, sent something electric through her chest. "There," Boone said. Something that might have been approval colored his voice. "Now do it again." They practiced until the light started to fail. Abigail's shoulder was bruised from the rifle's recoil, her ears ringing despite the cloth Boone had given her to stuff in them. "You're not good," he said as they walked back to the cabin. "But you're learning. That's what matters." That night, Abigail fell asleep before the sun finished setting. The days that followed blurred together into a rhythm of exhaustion and small victories. Water, wood, shooting. Boone added new skills slowly, carefully, like he was building a structure that couldn't afford weak points. He taught her to start a fire with damp wood and only 3 matches. He taught her to read weather in the color of the sky and the way the wind smelled. He taught her which plants in the forest were edible and which would kill her in hours. "Hemlock looks like parsley," he said, showing her the difference. "Folks die every year because they don't pay attention. Up here, not paying attention is suicide." He taught her to track, to read the stories written in snow and mud, deer prints and elk prints, and the distinctive pattern of bear claws. "You see this?" he said, pointing to a set of massive paw prints near the creek. "You go the other direction. Fast. Don't run. That triggers prey drive. But don't hang around either." "What if it follows me?" "Then you shoot it and hope you hit something vital before it tears your head off." He said it so matter-of-factly that Abigail laughed. Then she realized he wasn't joking. The work was relentless. Every muscle in her body hurt constantly. Her hands developed calluses, then blisters, then harder calluses. She fell asleep before the fire every night, too exhausted to dream. But something was changing. The morning she carried water without spilling a drop, Boone nodded once. "Good." The day she split a full cord of wood without stopping, he said, "You're getting stronger." The afternoon she hit 5 cans in a row at 30 yards, he almost smiled. She was transforming cell by cell into something harder. 2 weeks after arriving at the cabin, Abigail woke before dawn to the sound of Boone loading gear. "Where are you going?" she asked from the loft. "Hunting. Deer, if I can find one. We're low on meat. I'm coming with you." "No, you're not. Trail's too hard." "You said I needed to learn." "I said a lot of things." He didn't look up from his pack. "This is different. We'll be out all day, maybe overnight if I pick up a track. Temperature's dropping. You're not ready." Something hot flared in Abigail's chest. "Stop telling me what I'm not ready for." Boone paused, looked at her. "You want to come? You keep up. I'm not slowing down for you, and I'm not carrying you back if you fold. Clear?" "Clear." They left an hour later, moving through pre-dawn darkness with only starlight to guide them. Boone set a brutal pace, following game trails that climbed higher into the mountains. Abigail's lungs burned in the cold air. Her legs screamed, but she kept moving. They walked for 3 hours before Boone stopped, studying the ground. "Fresh tracks," he said quietly. "Buck, good size. Moving east." He followed the trail like he was reading a book, pointing out details Abigail would have missed. Broken branches, disturbed snow, a patch of ground where the deer had pawed looking for grass. "He's close," Boone whispered. "Maybe quarter mile. Wind's in our favor." They moved slower now, each step deliberate. Boone's hand signals were clear. Stop, crouch, wait. Abigail saw the deer first. It was massive, at least 200 pounds, with a rack of antlers that could kill a man if he got careless. It stood in a clearing, head down, pawing at the snow. Boone raised his rifle, aimed, hesitated. He lowered the gun and handed it to Abigail. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "You shoot it." "I've never—" "You've been practicing 2 weeks. Time to find out if it took." His voice was barely audible. "Aim for the shoulder, right behind the front leg. That hits the heart." Abigail's hands were shaking. She raised the rifle, pressed it into her shoulder the way he'd taught her, found the deer in her sights. It was beautiful, powerful, alive. "I can't," she breathed. "You can. You need to." Boone's voice was right beside her ear. "This is what survival looks like. It ain't pretty, but it's honest." The deer raised its head, scenting something on the wind. Abigail squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The sound cracked across the valley like thunder. The deer dropped. "Good shot," Boone said. He was already moving, crossing the clearing to where the animal lay. By the time Abigail caught up, he was kneeling beside it, checking for breath. It was still alive. Its eyes were wide, terrified, its sides heaving. "Finish it," Boone said, handing her his knife. Abigail stared at the blade. "I can't." "You already did. You put the bullet in it. Now you finish what you started." His voice was gentle but firm. "This is the part nobody talks about, the part that matters. You don't let nothing suffer." Her hand closed around the knife handle. Boone showed her where to cut, quick and clean. The deer's eyes went still. Abigail knelt in the snow beside the animal she'd killed and felt something crack open inside her chest. "First time's always hard," Boone said quietly. "You did good. I killed it." "You did. And tonight, we'll eat because of it. That's how it works up here. Nothing dies for no reason." He taught her how to field dress the deer, how to remove the organs without puncturing anything that would spoil the meat. It was gruesome work, blood up to her elbows, her stomach threatening rebellion. But she did it. By the time they hauled the meat back to the cabin, full dark had fallen. They'd been gone 12 hours. Abigail could barely stand. "Go clean up," Boone said. "I'll handle the rest." Abigail washed in water so cold it felt like knives. When she came back inside, Boone had venison steaks sizzling in the pan. They ate in silence. "Thank you," Abigail said finally. "For what?" "For not doing it for me. For making me finish what I started." Boone nodded slowly. "You're not the woman who got off that horse 2 weeks ago." "No," Abigail agreed. "I'm not." But the transformation wasn't finished. 3 days later, Abigail was hauling water when she heard it, a low, rumbling growl that raised every hair on her body. She turned slowly. The bear was 30 feet away, massive and dark against the snow. It wasn't a black bear. It was a grizzly, easily 700 pounds, with claws as long as her fingers. Abigail's mind went blank. Every lesson Boone had taught her evaporated like steam. She stood frozen, bucket still in her hands, staring at death on 4 legs. The bear took a step toward her, then another. "Abigail," Boone's voice came from the cabin behind her, calm and level. "Set down the buckets, slow." She set them down. Water slopped everywhere. She didn't care. "Back toward me. Don't run. Don't turn your back." She took a step backward. Her boot slipped on ice. She caught herself. The bear huffed, a sound like a steam engine. "Keep coming." Another step. Another. The cabin was 20 feet behind her. Might as well have been 20 miles. The bear charged. It happened so fast Abigail's brain couldn't process it. 1 second the animal was standing still, the next it was a freight train of fur and muscle and teeth. The rifle shot split the air. The bear stumbled, roared, kept coming. Another shot. This one hit the shoulder, spinning the animal sideways. "Get inside," Boone roared. Abigail ran. She hit the cabin door, stumbled through, spun around. Boone was backing toward the cabin, rifle raised, firing methodically. 1 shot, 2, 3. The bear was 10 feet from him when it finally dropped. Boone slammed the door, threw the bolt, leaned against it, breathing hard. "You okay?" he asked. Abigail nodded. She couldn't speak. "That's why I told you about the tracks," Boone said. He was checking his rifle, reloading automatically. "That bear's been around for a week. I saw the signs. Should have hunted it down before it got bold." "I froze," Abigail said. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I couldn't move." "First time you face down a bear, you're allowed to freeze." He set the rifle aside, moved to the window, checking outside. "Second time, you better remember what to do." "Will there be a second time?" "Up here? Probably." They stayed inside the rest of the day while Boone kept watch. The bear didn't move, just lay in the snow, massive and dead, steam rising from its body in the cold air. "We'll skin it tomorrow," Boone said. "Meat's no good. Grizzly tastes like punishment, but the hide's worth keeping, and the claws." That night, Abigail lay in the loft listening to Boone move around downstairs. She kept seeing the bear in her mind, kept feeling that paralysis, that absolute certainty of death. She'd frozen. Next time, freezing would get her killed. The thought kept her awake until dawn. Over the next weeks, Boone pushed harder. He taught her to fight, basic brawling techniques that had nothing to do with grace and everything to do with survival. "Someone grabs you from behind, you do this." He demonstrated, his movements economical and brutal. Stomp their instep, elbow to the solar plexus, turn and strike the throat. Don't think, just react. They drilled until Abigail's body remembered the moves without conscious thought. He taught her to navigate by stars, by the position of moss on trees, by the way water flows. "You get lost up here, you die," he said. "Simple as that. Know where you are, know where you're going, know how to get back." He taught her to preserve food, to smoke meat and store roots and make everything last longer than it wanted to. Winter up here runs 6 months. You run out of food in February, you got a long wait until spring. But the hardest lessons weren't physical. One night, sitting by the fire, Boone looked at her across the flames. "Why'd your father start investigating Granger?" he asked. Abigail was quiet for a moment. "A woman came into the store. Mary Peterson. She was crying. Said Granger had foreclosed on her husband's ranch over debts she swore they didn't owe." "Let me guess. The debt papers had her husband's signature." "Yes. But Mary said Robert never signed anything, never even borrowed money from Granger." "Forgery," Boone said. "That's what my father thought. So he started looking into other foreclosures, found a pattern, Dozens of families, all claiming the same thing, all carrying debts they swore they never incurred. He found proof? He found ledgers, original records showing the real transactions versus what Granger reported to the territory. He was going to take it to the federal marshal. But Granger found out first. Abigail nodded. They said it was a robbery. Said my father fought back and got shot, but he was killed in his own store in the middle of the day, and nobody heard anything. Nobody saw anything. Because everyone in town's either working for Granger or scared of him. When I tried to tell the sheriff, he told me I was hysterical with grief. When I tried to tell the mayor, he informed me I had inherited debts that needed immediate payment. Debts your father never owed. Exactly. Boone stared into the fire. The ledgers. Where are they? I don't know. I looked everywhere. The store, our house, every place I could think of. Either Granger found them first, or my father hid them somewhere I couldn't find. Or someone else has them. Abigail looked up sharply. What do you mean? Your father was smart. He knew Granger was dangerous. He wouldn't keep evidence like that somewhere obvious. Boone leaned forward. Who were his friends? People he trusted? There was Pastor Thomas, but he ran the auction, so clearly my father misjudged him. Judge Reeves, but he's territorial, not local. Dr. Morrison, maybe. Morrison died last year. I didn't know that. Heart attack. At least, that's what they said. Boone's expression was grim. Anyone else? Abigail thought hard. There was a woman. She worked for the telegraph office. Margaret something. He used to talk to her sometimes, bring her books. Margaret Chen, Boone said. She's good people. One of the few. You think my father gave her the ledgers? I think it's possible. Question is, if he did, are they still there? And how do we get them without getting her killed? We can't, Abigail said firmly. I won't risk someone else's life for this. Noble, Boone said. Also stupid. Those ledgers are the only thing that can bring Granger down legally. Without them, he owns that town forever. Then he owns it. Don't care anymore. I just want to survive. You think he's going to let you? You think he's going to let me? Boone's voice was hard. We've got maybe until spring before he sends men up here. Maybe less if he gets impatient. When that happens, we can fight or we can run. But if we run, we're running for the rest of our lives. And if we fight, then we better make damn sure we win. The conversation sat heavy between them. Winter deepened. The snow piled higher. Some days they couldn't leave the cabin, the wind howling so loud it sounded like the mountain was screaming. But inside there was warmth, fire, food, books. Abigail and Boone fell into an easy routine. She cooked, he hunted. They both did everything else. And slowly, carefully, they started talking about things that weren't survival. What did you do before? Abigail asked one night. Before Sarah. Before all this. I built things, Boone said. Furniture mostly. Cabinets, tables. Had a workshop in town. You're good with your hands. Something flickered in his expression. Used to be. Haven't made anything in years except repairs. Why not? He was quiet for a long time. Didn't seem to matter anymore. What's the point of making something beautiful when everything you love can be destroyed in an afternoon? Abigail had no answer for that. But 2 days later, she found him in the workshop behind the cabin, planing wood, his movements careful and deliberate. He didn't say anything about it. Neither did she. The thing neither of them talked about was the marriage. It hung between them, legal and binding and completely unconsummated. They slept in separate spaces, maintained careful distance, never touched except in training. But sometimes Abigail would catch Boone watching her, his expression unreadable, and sometimes she found herself watching him back. One morning in late February, Abigail was splitting wood when she heard hoofbeats. She dropped the axe, grabbed the rifle Boone insisted she keep close, and ran for the cabin. "Rider coming!" she called. Boone was outside in seconds, his own rifle ready. They took positions on either side of the door, waiting. The horse came into view, small, tired-looking. The rider was smaller, wrapped in so many layers it was impossible to tell gender. "Hold there," Boone called. "State your business." The rider pulled up, raised both hands. "Don't shoot. Please don't shoot." The voice was young, female. "I'm looking for Boone Callahan," the girl said. "Who's asking?" My name's Clara Webb. I ran away from Cedar Hollow. They said you might help me." Boone and Abigail exchanged glances. "Who said?" Boone asked. "Margaret Chen, at the telegraph office. She said if I was ever in trouble to find you." Margaret Chen, the woman Abigail's father had trusted. "Get down," Boone said. "Slow." Clara dismounted, stumbled, nearly fell. When she unwrapped the scarf from her face, Abigail gasped. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, and her face was a mass of bruises, one eye swollen completely shut. "Who did this?" Abigail asked, already moving to help her inside. "My husband," Clara said. The word was bitter. "I was sold to him 3 months ago, at the auction." Abigail felt ice slide down her spine. "How'd you get away?" Boone asked. "He drinks. Last night he drank enough to pass out. I took his horse and ran." Clara's good eye fixed on Boone. "Margaret said you saved someone. Said you took her right out of the auction and Granger couldn't do nothing about it." "That's not quite how it happened," Boone said. "Close enough," Abigail said quietly. "Come on, let's get you warm." Inside, while Abigail tended Clara's injuries, the girl talked. "They're looking for you," she said to Abigail. "Both of you. Granger's got men asking questions all over the territory." "What kind of questions?" Boone asked. "Where you went, who might know. He's offering money for information. Anyone talking?" "Margaret says no, says folks are too scared of you." Clara winced as Abigail pressed a cold cloth to her eye. "But Granger's getting mean about it. He arrested 2 men last week for nothing, said they were helping you hide." "He can't do that," Abigail said. "He's doing it." Clara looked between them. "Margaret said to tell you something else, said it was important." "What?" "She said the package is safe, the one Abigail's father gave her. She's been keeping it hidden, but Granger's getting suspicious. He searched the telegraph office twice. She thinks he knows she has something." Abigail's breath caught. "The ledgers. She has the ledgers." "I don't know about any ledgers," Clara said, "but Margaret said if you want them, you gotta come get them soon, before Granger figures it out." Boone stood, paced to the window, stared out at the mountains. "It's a trap," he said. "Maybe," Abigail said. "Or maybe it's our only chance." "Our chance at what? Getting killed?" "Our chance at ending this." Abigail moved to stand beside him. "You said it yourself. We can run or we can fight. I'm tired of running. You've been here 6 weeks, and I'm already tired of it." She caught his arm, made him look at her. "My father died for this. Margaret's risking her life for this. How many more people have to suffer before someone stops him?" Boone's jaw worked. "You know what you're asking? I'm asking you to help me finish what my father started. You're asking me to walk back into Cedar Hollow, where there's a price on my head and half the town wants me dead." "Yes." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed. "You really have changed," he said. "Told you I would." "All right." Boone turned to Clara. "How long since you left town?" "I rode all night, maybe 8 hours." "Then your husband's awake by now. He'll have people looking." Boone grabbed his coat. "We got maybe a day before someone tracks you here. Not enough time to plan this right, but it'll have to do." "Plan what?" Clara asked. Abigail felt something fierce and bright kindle in her chest. "We're going back," she said. "We're going to get those ledgers, and we're going to make Silas Granger pay for everything he's done." Clara's eyes went wide. "That's suicide." "Probably," Boone agreed. He checked his rifle, started loading ammunition. "But it beats waiting up here for him to come kill us in our sleep." He looked at Abigail. "You sure about this?" The woman on the auction block would have said no. Would have stayed quiet, stayed safe, stayed small. But that woman was dead. "I'm sure," Abigail said. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow and coming storms. They left the cabin at midnight under a moonless sky that pressed down like a lid on a coffin. Clara stayed behind despite her protests. "You can't ride," Boone had told her flatly. "You can barely stand. You stay here, keep the fire going, and if we're not back in 3 days, you head north to the Cheyenne camps. Ask for a man named Running Elk. Tell him Boone sent you." Now it was just the two of them, picking their way down the mountain trail in darkness, so complete Abigail could barely see her horse's ears. Boone led, moving with the confidence of a man who'd walked this path 100 times blind. "How far to town?" Abigail asked quietly. 5 hours if we push. 6 if we're careful." "Which are we being?" "Careful. No point getting there fast if we're too tired to function." They rode in silence for a while. The temperature kept dropping. Abigail's breath came out in clouds that froze on her scarf. "You scared?" Boone asked. "Terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the people who aren't scared that get killed." "You scared?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Yeah, I am." Something about the admission steadied her. If Boone Callahan, the man who'd walked into a church full of armed men and claimed a woman in front of the whole town, if he was scared, then fear was just part of the job, not something to overcome, something to carry. They reached the outskirts of Cedar Hollow just before dawn, the sky turning from black to charcoal to the gray of dirty snow. Boone pulled up, studying the town from the cover of pine trees. "We got maybe an hour before people start moving around. Margaret opens the telegraph office at 6. "How do we get to her without being seen?" "We don't. Not really." He dismounted, started stripping gear off his horse. "But there's a difference between being seen and being recognized. Town's used to trappers coming through this time of year. Long as we keep our heads down and don't do anything stupid, we might pass." "Might? I'm wanted for murder, and you're supposed to be my captive wife hidden in the mountains. There's no scenario where this is safe." He handed her a shapeless coat that smelled like old leather and animal fat. "Put this on. Pull the hood up. Keep your face down." Abigail pulled on the coat. It was huge on her, which was probably the point, made her shape less distinctive. They tied the horses in a ravine a quarter-mile from town and went in on foot. Boone moved like a ghost, using buildings and alleyways for cover. Abigail followed, trying to match his steps, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone in Cedar Hollow could hear it. Main Street was still mostly empty, a few shopkeepers setting up, someone sweeping a boardwalk. The general store's door hanging open, lamplight spilling out. The telegraph office sat between the bank and the dress shop, a narrow building with a false front and dusty windows. "Back door," Boone murmured. They circled around through the alley, stepping over frozen trash and puddles turned to ice. The back door was locked. Boone knocked, 3 quick raps. Nothing. He knocked again. The door cracked open. A woman's face appeared, Chinese features, dark eyes that went wide when she saw them. "Inside," Margaret Chen said. "Now." They slipped through. Margaret slammed the door, threw the bolt, then turned on them. "You're insane," she hissed. "Both of you. Granger has men watching my office. He knows something's wrong, he just doesn't know what yet." "Clara made it to us," Abigail said. "She told us about the ledgers." Margaret's face tightened. That girl should have kept her mouth shut. She was trying to help. Helping gets people killed in this town. Margaret moved to the window, peered through a gap in the curtains. "Your father gave me those ledgers the night before he died. Made me promise to keep them safe. Said if anything happened to him, I should get them to the territorial marshal." "Why didn't you?" Boone asked. "Because the territorial marshal is Granger's cousin, you idiot. I send those ledgers to him. They disappear, and I wind up in the river." She turned to face them. "I've been waiting for someone I could trust. Someone with enough leverage to make this stick." "We don't have leverage," Abigail said. "No, but you've got motivation, and you've got him." Margaret jerked her chin at Boone. "Half the territory's scared of you. The other half thinks you're dead. Either way, you're the closest thing to a wild card this town's seen in 5 years." "Where are the ledgers?" Boone asked. Margaret crossed to a filing cabinet, pulled out the bottom drawer, reached underneath. Something clicked. A false bottom swung down. Inside was a leather portfolio, thick with papers. "Your father was thorough," Margaret said, handing it to Abigail. "He documented everything. Forged signatures, falsified debts, property seizures, suspicious deaths. There's enough evidence here to hang Granger 3 times over." Abigail opened the portfolio. Her father's handwriting covered page after page. Notes, dates, names, copies of original documents alongside Granger's forgeries. "This is it," she whispered. "This is everything." "Yeah. And it's also your death warrant if Granger finds out you have it." Margaret moved back to the window. "You need to get out of town, now. Head to Fort Benson. There's a federal judge there, Nathaniel Reeves. He's straight. Not one of Granger's people. Fort Benson's 3 days' ride, Boone said. Then you better get moving. Wait. Abigail's mind was racing. If we leave now, Granger will know something happened. He'll know you gave us something. I'll handle Granger. By yourself? He'll kill you. Maybe. But if you stay here, he'll kill all of us. Margaret's voice was hard. Your father died for this. Don't waste it by getting caught before you can do anything with it. A bell rang somewhere in the building, the front door opening. Margaret's face went white. That's the morning clerk. You need to hide. Where? There. She pointed to a storage closet barely big enough for one person, let alone two. Boone grabbed Abigail's arm, shoved her toward the closet. They squeezed inside, pulling the door shut just as footsteps entered the office. Morning, Mrs. Chen. A man's voice, young and cheerful. David, you're early? Got a telegram that came through last night. Thought you'd want to see it. The closet was pitch dark and barely 3 feet wide. Abigail could feel Boone's chest against her back, his breath warm on her neck. The portfolio dug into her ribs. What's the telegram say? Margaret asked. It's from the Territorial Marshal's office. They're sending deputies to Cedar Hollow. Should arrive tomorrow. What for? Doesn't say. Just says to prepare accommodations for 6 men and their horses. 6 deputies. Coming to Cedar Hollow. Abigail felt Boone tense behind her. Anything else? Margaret asked, voice carefully neutral. No, ma'am. Want me to file it? I'll handle it. You go ahead and open the front. Footsteps retreated. A door closed. The closet door yanked open. You heard? Margaret asked. 6 deputies, Boone said. That's not routine. That's a hunting party. For you? For both of us. Granger must have petitioned the marshal directly. He grabbed Abigail's hand. We need to move, now. The front's too exposed, Margaret said. David's out there. Then we go through the roof. Margaret looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Through the roof? Buildings in this town all share walls. We can cross 3, maybe 4 roofs before we have to come down. Boone was already moving, dragging a chair under the ceiling access panel. Where's the closest safe exit? The hotel, maybe? 2 buildings over, but the roof will hold or it won't. Either way, it's better than walking out the front door. He climbed onto the chair, pushed the panel aside. Come on. Getting Abigail through the ceiling was harder than Boone made it look. She had to pull herself up with arm strength she'd barely developed, her shoulders screaming. But she made it. The roof was slanted, covered in ice and old snow. Below them, Cedar Hollow was waking up. Voices drifted from the street, the smell of cooking fires and coffee. Stay low, Boone breathed. Step where I step. They moved across the roof like burglars, which Abigail supposed they were. The next building was the dress shop. The gap between roofs was maybe 3 feet. Boone jumped it easily. Abigail stared at the gap, her stomach churning. Don't think, Boone said, reaching back for her. Just jump. She jumped. Her feet hit the other roof, slipped on ice, started to slide. Boone's hand caught her coat, yanked her forward. Told you not to think, he muttered. They crossed 2 more roofs. The hotel was newer, taller, with a steep pitch that made climbing treacherous. Boone found a window, forced it open, dropped inside. Abigail followed, landing hard in what appeared to be a storage room. Mops, buckets, spare linens. We're in the hotel, she whispered. Now what? Now we try to walk out like paying guests. Boone brushed ice and dirt off his coat. You still got the portfolio? She checked. The leather case was still tucked inside her coat. Yes. Don't let go of it. That's the only thing that matters. They made it down 2 flights of stairs before they heard voices. Search every room if we have to. Granger wants them found. Boone's hand shot out, pulling Abigail into an alcove. They pressed flat against the wall as 2 men passed, both armed, both wearing deputy badges. They're already here, Abigail breathed. Those aren't territorial deputies. Those are Granger's men wearing badges. Boone's jaw was tight. He's moving faster than I thought. We're trapped. Not yet. He looked around, calculating. There's always a service exit. Hotels need to move supplies. We find that. We're gone. They found it on the ground floor, hidden behind the kitchen. A narrow door that opened onto an alley that stank of old food and chamber pots. The alley was empty. For about 5 seconds. Then a man stepped around the corner, saw them, and his hand went to his gun. Boone was faster. The punch came from nowhere, connecting with the man's jaw so hard Abigail heard bone crack. The man dropped like a cut string. "Go," Boone said. They ran. Behind them, someone shouted. Boots pounded on boardwalks. A bell started ringing, the alarm signal spreading through town. "The ravine," Boone gasped. "Get to the horses." They sprinted through back alleys and between buildings, cutting through yards where dogs barked and chickens scattered. Abigail's lungs burned, her legs felt like lead. A gunshot cracked the air. Wood splintered beside her head. She didn't slow down. They reached the ravine, half sliding down the slope. The horses were still there, thank everything. Boone was in the saddle before Abigail even reached her mare. "Ride," he said. "Don't stop, don't look back." They rode. More gunshots behind them, distant now but getting closer. Abigail leaned low over her horse's neck, giving the mare her head, trusting the animal to find footing on the icy trail. "They're following," she shouted. "I know. Keep moving." The trail climbed into the foothills. Behind them, Cedar Hollow disappeared behind a ridge, but Abigail could still hear pursuit. Horses, men shouting, the occasional crack of a rifle. "How many?" she called to Boone. "At least 6, maybe more. Can we outrun them?" "Not if they're smart." He pointed ahead. "But they might not be smart." The trail forked. The right path was wider, easier, heading north into relatively open country. The left path was narrow, treacherous, climbing straight up into the mountains. Boone took the left path. "Are you insane?" Abigail shouted. "Probably. Stay close." The trail was barely a trail at all, more like a suggestion scratched into the mountainside. Abigail's horse balked twice, nearly throwing her. Behind them, the pursuit hit the fork. Most of the riders took the right path, but 2 took the left. "We've still got company," Abigail yelled. Boone didn't answer. He was focused on the trail ahead, navigating switchbacks and loose scree and sections where one wrong step would send them tumbling down a 100-foot drop. The trail climbed higher, the air got thinner. Abigail's vision started to tunnel, and then the trail just ended. They came around a bend, and there was nothing ahead but a cliff face too steep to climb and a drop too far to jump. Dead end. Boone pulled up, spinning his horse. Behind them, the 2 riders appeared around the last switchback, maybe 50 yards away. "Get down," Boone said. "What?" "Get off the horse. Now." Abigail dismounted. Boone did the same, slapping both horses on the rump, sending them scrambling back down the trail. He grabbed his rifle, moved to the cliff face where a tumble of boulders provided cover. "Get behind me," he said. The riders approached cautiously now, seeing they'd cornered their quarry. "Callahan!" one of them shouted. "You're done. Throw out your weapons and step into the open." "How about you boys turn around and ride back to town?" Boone called. "Tell Granger I ain't interested in dying today." "That's not your choice." "Sure it is. Same way it's your choice whether you leave here on a horse or in a box." The riders exchanged glances. Then they dismounted, taking cover behind rocks on their side of the trail. Standoff. "This is stupid," one of them called. "We got you pinned. More men are coming up the other trail. You got nowhere to go." "Then I guess we wait," Boone said. He glanced at Abigail. "You still got that rifle I gave you?" She did. She'd almost forgotten about it, strapped to her back. "You remember how to use it?" "Yes." "Good, because you're about to get a practical exam." The first shot came without warning, striking the boulder inches from Boone's head. He returned fire instantly, his shot punching through the rock where the shooter hid. Then it was chaos. Gunfire echoed off the cliff face, impossibly loud. Abigail squeezed the trigger, barely aiming, just trying to keep the men's heads down. Her second shot hit one of the horses, which screamed and bolted, nearly trampling its owner. "Aim higher!" Boone shouted over the noise. "You're shooting low!" She adjusted, fired again. This time she saw her bullet strike rock near one of the men's positions. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Silence except for ringing ears and heavy breathing. "You hit?" Boone asked. "No, you?" "I'm fine." He was reloading, fingers moving automatically. "They're going to rush us. Get ready." But the rush didn't come. Instead, one of the men stood up, hands raised. "Hold fire," he called. "We're pulling back." "Why?" Boone kept his rifle aimed. "Because you're not worth dying for, and Granger don't pay enough to charge a man like you in a bad position." The man started backing toward his horse. "But this ain't over, you know that, right?" I know. Granger's offering $1,000 for you. Double that for both of you alive. He swung into the saddle. Every bounty hunter in the territory will be coming. You can't run far enough. Watch me. The riders left, taking the wounded horse with them. Boone waited until they were out of sight before lowering his rifle. That was too easy, he said. Easy? Abigail's voice came out shaky. We almost died. No, we were always going to survive this. They didn't want it enough. He stood, scanning the trail. The question is whether Granger knows that, and if he's sending better men next time. What do we do now? We can't go back to the cabin. They'll find it eventually. Can't go to Fort Benson. 3 days on the road is too long when half the territory's hunting us. Then where? Boone was quiet, thinking. Granger's got one weakness, one thing he can't control. What? Public opinion. He rules Cedar Hollow because people are too scared to stand against him. But that's also fragile. All it takes is one crack. I don't understand. Those ledgers your father made, that's evidence. Real, documented proof of what Granger's done. But evidence don't matter if nobody sees it. He looked at her. We need to make noise. Big enough noise that Granger can't cover it up. How? A slow, dangerous smile crossed Boone's face. We're going back to Cedar Hollow, but this time we're not sneaking. We're going to walk right up to Granger's front door and take what we need. That's suicide. Probably, but it's also the last thing he'll expect. They found their horses a quarter-mile down the mountain, both animals exhausted but unharmed. They rode west, circling wide around Cedar Hollow, moving through country so rough the pursuers would never think to look there. By nightfall, they were perched in the hills above town, watching lamplight bloom in windows as darkness fell. There, Boone said, pointing. That's Granger's place. The mansion sat on the north edge of town, 3 stories of imported brick and real glass windows. It looked obscene against the rough frontier buildings around it, like wealth showing off its own excess. He keeps records in his office, Abigail said. My father mentioned it. Contracts, deeds, correspondence, everything he needs to maintain his empire. And everything we need to destroy it. The office will be locked, probably guarded. Guards I can handle. Locks too. Boone studied the building. What we need is a distraction, something big enough to pull most of his men away. They planned through the night, refining details, looking for flaws. It was a terrible plan. It had maybe a 30% chance of working, but 30% was better than 0. At 2 a.m, they moved. Boone approached from the east, slipping through shadows like he was part of them. Abigail went west, carrying kindling and a bottle of kerosene they'd taken from an abandoned trapper's cache. Her target was the stable. She doused the kindling, struck a match, tossed it. Flame caught, spread, roared to life with shocking speed. Horses screamed. Within seconds, the stable was an inferno, light blasting across the compound. Men came running from the main house, shouting, grabbing buckets, trying to save the animals. Abigail ran the other direction, circling back toward the mansion's west side. Boone was already inside. She found the window he'd forced, climbed through, dropped into a hallway that smelled like cigars and money. Upstairs, Boone whispered from the shadows. 3rd door on the right. They climbed the stairs while below them men shouted about fire and horses and where the hell was the water pump. The office door was locked. Boone kicked it open. Inside was everything they could have hoped for. A massive desk, filing cabinets, a safe built into the wall. Start with the desk, Boone said. I'll handle the safe. Abigail rifled through papers, her hands shaking. Contracts, letters, ledgers that mirrored the forgeries her father had documented. Look at this, she breathed, holding up a document. It's a letter to the territorial marshal. Granger's paying him $1,000 a month to ignore complaints. Take it. Take everything. She grabbed papers by the handful, shoving them into a satchel she'd brought. Behind her, Boone worked on the safe. She heard grinding metal, his muttered curses. Then, got it. The safe swung open. Inside was more than either of them expected. Stacks of cash, gold coins, but also more documents. These ones tied with red string, marked confidential. Boone grabbed them all. We need to go, he said. Now. They turned toward the door. Silas Granger stood in the doorway, holding a revolver. I wondered if you'd be stupid enough to come back, he said pleasantly. I must admit, I'm almost impressed by the audacity. Behind him, the hallway filled with men, armed men. "Drop your weapons," Granger said. "Both of you." Boone's rifle clattered to the floor. Abigail's followed. "That's better." Granger stepped into the room. "Miss Rowe, or should I say Mrs. Callahan? I'm hurt you didn't invite me to the wedding." "Go to hell," Abigail said. "Charming as ever." He turned to Boone. "And you, the ghost of Copper Ridge. For 5 years I've wanted you dead. For 5 years you've been a splinter I couldn't remove. But here you are, breaking into my home, stealing my property, making yourself impossible to ignore." "Your property?" Boone's voice was flat. "You mean the evidence of every crime you've committed?" "Crime is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as business." "You killed my father," Abigail said. "Yes, I did." Granger said it like he was admitting he'd had coffee that morning. Thomas was a good man, smart, honest, all the qualities that make someone profoundly dangerous to men like me. He couldn't be bought, couldn't be scared, so he had to be removed. Why? The word came out broken. Why not just leave us alone? Because your father found irregularities in land transfers dating back 15 years. He was going to expose the entire system, every foreclosure, every debt, every acre I've acquired. Granger moved to the desk, picked up one of the documents Abigail had dropped. He was going to destroy everything I built. "Everything you stole," Boone said. "Semantics." Granger smiled. "But yes, I suppose from a certain perspective, I am a thief, just a very successful one." "You won't get away with this," Abigail said. "My dear, I already have. You're standing in my office, surrounded by my men, holding stolen property. When the territorial deputies arrive tomorrow, I'll hand you over personally. They'll hang you both for murder and theft." "We didn't murder anyone." "No? Tell that to the 2 men you shot on the mountain trail this morning." Abigail's blood went cold. "We didn't kill them. Doesn't matter, I'll say you did. My men will testify. The jury, which I own, will convict." He gestured to his men. "Take them to the cellar. Make sure they're secured. Tomorrow, they hang." Hands grabbed Abigail's arms. She fought, twisting, trying to break free. Someone hit her, hard enough to make her vision blur. "Don't hurt her too badly," Granger said mildly. "I want her conscious for the trial. It's more satisfying when they know what's happening." They dragged her and Boone down to the cellar, a stone room that smelled like mold and old potatoes. Heavy chains weighted, bolted to the walls. The men chained Boone first, his arms spread wide. Then Abigail, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Boone laughed, low and bitter. "Some rescue," he said. "I'm sorry," Abigail whispered. "For what?" "For getting you killed. Nobody's dead yet." He shifted, chains rattling. "You got any of those lockpicks I gave you?" "They took everything." "Damn!" Silence again. "Boone?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for trying." "We're not done trying. We're chained in a cellar waiting to be hanged. I've been in worse spots." "When?" "Give me a minute. I'll think of one." Despite everything, Abigail smiled in the darkness. Above them, footsteps creaked. Voices argued. Someone laughed. "They're celebrating," Abigail said. "Let them. They think they've won." "Haven't they?" Boone turned his head toward her, though she couldn't see his face in the dark. "Your father didn't die for nothing," he said quietly. "Those ledgers we took from the cabin, Margaret still has them. Even if we don't make it, that evidence is out there. Someone will find it. Someone will use it. That's not enough. Maybe not. But it's something." His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers lacing together despite the chains. "And you're something. The woman who stood up to him, who came back even when she didn't have to, who learned to survive when everyone said she was too soft, too weak, too broken." Abigail's throat tightened. "I'm not any of those things." "I know. That's my point." They sat in the dark, holding hands, waiting for dawn and whatever it would bring. Dawn came through a crack in the cellar wall, a thin blade of light that cut across stone and rusted chains. Abigail had stopped feeling her hands sometime around 3 in the morning. Now they were just cold weights hanging from her wrists. Boone was awake. She could tell by his breathing, steady and controlled, the way a man breathes when he's thinking hard about staying alive. "How long you figure before they come for us?" she asked. "Couple hours. Granger likes his theater. He'll wait until the town's awake so everyone can watch." "You really have been in worse spots than this?" "Once. Got caught in a bear trap up near the Canadian border. Alone. Middle of winter. Had to chew through 3 inches of leather boot to get my foot out." "That's worse than this?" "At least I wasn't waiting to hang." He shifted, chains rattling. Though the bear trap didn't have quite as many armed men, footsteps sounded above them. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. The cellar door swung open. 4 men descended, led by a tall deputy with a mustache that looked like a dead animal on his lip. "Time to go," he said. They unchained Boone first. He didn't fight, didn't resist, just stood there while they bound his hands behind his back. When they came for Abigail, she did the same. "Granger wants you upstairs," the deputy said. "Got someone he wants you to meet." They were marched up through the mansion. Morning light flooded the hallway, making Abigail's eyes water after hours of darkness. Her legs barely worked, muscles stiff from cold and bad position. The office was full of people. Granger stood behind his desk, looking fresh and rested in a clean suit. Beside him stood a man in federal uniform, territorial deputy, judging by the badge. And in the corner, looking small and terrified, was Margaret Chen. "Ah, our guests," Granger said pleasantly. "I trust you slept well?" Abigail said nothing. "Allow me to introduce Deputy Marshal Thomas Garrett. He's come all the way from the territorial capital to investigate certain accusations of criminal activity." Granger smiled. "Of course, I've explained to the deputy marshal that the only criminals here are standing in front of us." Garrett looked them over with flat, professional eyes. "You're Boone Callahan?" "I am." "You're wanted for the murder of 6 men, multiple counts of assault, theft, destruction of property." "That what Granger told you?" "That's what the warrants say." "The warrants are lies," Abigail said. "Everything he's told you is a lie." "Miss Rowe." Garrett's tone didn't change. "You're charged as an accomplice to kidnapping, theft, and arson. Mr. Granger has been very clear about your involvement." "Of course he has. He owns you." Garrett's jaw tightened. "I'm a federal officer. I don't appreciate accusations of corruption." "Then maybe don't act corrupt," Boone said. One of the guards hit him, hard enough to split his lip. Blood ran down his chin. "Enough," Garrett said sharply. To the guards, "These are prisoners in federal custody. They will be treated according to law." "Of course, Marshal," Granger said smoothly. "My apologies. My men are simply protective. Your men need to learn restraint." Garrett turned back to Boone and Abigail. "You'll be held here until transport arrives to take you to the territorial court. Your trial will be conducted according to proper procedure." "How much is he paying you?" Abigail asked. Garrett's face went stone. "I don't take bribes." "Then you're the only person in this territory who doesn't." She looked at Granger. "What did you do with the documents we took? The evidence?" "Evidence of what, my dear?" "You know what? The contracts, the letters, the proof of everything you've done." "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. When my men apprehended you, you were carrying nothing but stolen cash and a satchel of worthless papers." "Worthless?" Abigail's stomach dropped. "You destroyed them." "I secured my property. There's a difference." She lunged for him. The guards caught her before she made it 3 feet, slamming her down onto the floor hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. "Please," Granger said to Garrett. "Control your prisoners." "Get her up," Garrett ordered. "Gently." They hauled Abigail to her feet. Her shoulders screamed where she'd hit the floor. "What about her?" Boone asked, nodding toward Margaret. "What's she charged with?" "Mrs. Chen is here to provide testimony about your criminal activities," Granger said. Margaret's face was gray. She wouldn't meet Abigail's eyes. "What did he threaten you with?" Abigail asked quietly. "My daughter," Margaret whispered. "She's got my daughter." "Protective custody," Granger corrected. "The child is safe as long as Mrs. Chen cooperates." "You bastard," Boone said. "I'm a businessman. I protect my interests." Granger moved to the window, looking out at Cedar Hollow waking up below. "In 1 hour, I'm holding a town assembly. The good people of Cedar Hollow will hear the evidence against you. They will see justice served. and then everyone can return to their lives, secure in the knowledge that criminals like you cannot threaten their safety. Safety? Abigail's voice rose. You've murdered people, stolen their land, destroyed families. I've built an empire, Granger interrupted. I've brought civilization to a lawless territory. Yes, some people have been inconvenienced. That's the price of progress. Inconvenienced, Abigail repeated. The word tasted like ash. My father was murdered. That's not inconvenience. That's murder. Your father was a thief who died resisting arrest. The record is quite clear. The record is a lie. The record is what I say it is. Granger turned from the window. Marshal Garrett, please remove these prisoners. I have preparations to make. They were taken to a room on the second floor and locked inside, 2 guards stationed outside the door. No windows. No furniture except a single chair. Boone sat down heavily. Blood still dripped from his split lip. We're done, Abigail said. She felt numb, hollow, like all the anger and fear had burned through her and left nothing but ash. We had evidence. We had proof. And he destroyed it. Maybe, Boone said. There's no maybe. We had one chance and we lost. Margaret still has the original ledgers, the ones your father gave her. And how do we get them? We're locked in a room with armed guards outside. Abigail slid down the wall, sitting on the floor. Even if we escape, where do we go? Everyone in this territory is either working for Granger or too scared to help. Boone was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember what I told you about fear? That it keeps you sharp, and that it's a choice. You can let it control you, or you can carry it and keep moving anyway. He leaned forward. We're not dead yet, which means we're not done yet. What are you talking about? Granger's holding a town assembly, public spectacle. He wants everyone to see us broken, see justice served, see his power on display. So that means witnesses, real witnesses, not just his people, and it means he has to follow some kind of procedure to make it look legitimate. Boone's eyes were hard and bright. Public trials cut both ways. If we can get people to listen, really listen, we might have a shot. At what? At telling the truth loud enough that it sticks. They won't believe us. They're all too scared. Some will be, but not everyone. He stood, started pacing the small room. Your father had friends in this town, people he helped, people he trusted. Margaret's one. There have to be others. Even if there are, what good does it do? Granger controls everything. He controls a lot, but control's not the same as loyalty. Fear makes a brittle foundation. Boone stopped pacing, looked at her. You've changed since that auction. You know that, right? What does that have to do with anything? You're not the woman who stood on that block waiting to be sold. You're harder now, stronger. You survived the mountain, you learned to fight, you shot a man and came back for more. He crouched in front of her. The question is whether you remember that, or whether you're going to let Granger convince you you're still that scared girl. Abigail met his eyes. I'm terrified. Good. Use it. Fear's just fuel if you burn it right. A key turned in the lock. The door opened. Garrett stood there, alone. On your feet, he said. It's time. They walked through Cedar Hollow under armed guard, hands bound, moving down the center of Main Street while the whole town watched. People lined the boardwalks, silent and staring. Children. Women. Men who looked away when Abigail tried to meet their eyes. The assembly was being held in the church. Of course it was the church. The same church where Abigail had stood on an auction block 2 months ago. The same chapel where Boone had kissed her in front of 200 witnesses. Now it was packed even fuller, every pew crammed, people standing along the walls. But the feeling was different. Before, there had been cruel excitement, the energy of a crowd come to see a spectacle. Now there was just tension, fear, the kind of silence that comes before bad weather. Granger sat at the front in a chair that looked like a throne. Garrett stood beside him. Other men Abigail recognized. Mayor Pritchard, Sheriff Doyle, Reverend Thomas, occupied the first row like a jury. She and Boone were placed in the center aisle, forced to stand while everyone stared. Good people of Cedar Hollow, Granger began, rising. His voice carried beautifully, practiced and smooth. We are gathered here today to witness justice. For too long, this territory has suffered under the threat of lawlessness. Men like Boone Callahan, who murder and steal without consequence. Women like Abigail Rowe, who conspire with criminals against the very community that raised them. That's a lie, Abigail said loudly. Silence, Garrett snapped. No. She raised her voice, addressing the room. I will not be silent while he rewrites history. My father was murdered because he discovered the truth about Silas Granger. He found evidence of fraud, forgery, theft. Your father was a drunk and a thief, Granger interrupted. Everyone here knows it. My father was honest. More honest than anyone in this room. Abigail's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. He documented everything, every forged signature, every falsified debt, every family Granger destroyed to steal their land. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. These are fantasies of a troubled woman, Granger said, but something had shifted in his tone. There is no evidence because you destroyed it. Last night, when we broke into your office, when you broke into my home and attempted to steal my property. We didn't steal. We took back evidence. Proof of your crimes. Abigail turned to face the crowd. How many of you have lost land to Silas Granger? How many have been foreclosed on for debts you don't remember signing for? Silence. But not empty silence. Charged silence. Martha Henderson, Abigail said, spotting the woman in the third row. Your husband's farm. You lost it 3 years ago. Do you remember signing those debt papers? Martha looked at her lap. Do you? Abigail pressed. No, Martha whispered, then louder. No, we never borrowed that money. This is absurd, Granger said. Marshal, control your prisoner. But Garrett was watching the crowd now, his expression unreadable. James Porter, Abigail continued, your family's mining claim, seized for unpaid taxes you swore you'd already paid. William Garrett, she stopped, looked at the marshal. Any relation? Garrett's face was stone. My brother, he lost his land 5 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Granger said smoothly, but these accusations... Were you planning to mention that? Garrett asked quietly. When you hired me to come handle this situation, were you planning to mention my brother lost everything to you? Your brother was a poor businessman. His failure is not my responsibility. His failure happened 3 months after he refused to sell you water rights. Interesting timing. The room had gone dead quiet. Marshal, Granger said, and now there was an edge in his voice. You're a federal officer. You have a duty. I have a duty to the law, not to you. Garrett turned to his deputies. Search the mansion. Everything. I want every ledger, every contract, every piece of paper in Granger's office brought here. You can't do that, Granger said. I can do exactly that. You're under investigation for corruption and fraud. That gives me authority to search any property connected to you. On whose authority? This is my town. On federal authority, this is Montana territory, which means territorial law supersedes local jurisdiction. Garrett's hand rested on his gun. You're welcome to resist, but I wouldn't recommend it. For the first time since Abigail had met him, Silas Granger looked uncertain. This is a mistake, he said. Maybe, but it's mine to make. Garrett nodded to his men. Go, and take 2 locals with you. I want witnesses who aren't on my payroll. Sheriff Doyle stood. I'll go. You're one of Granger's people, someone called from the crowd. I'm the law in this town, Doyle said. His voice was tight. And maybe it's time I started acting like it. Mayor Pritchard stood as well. I'll accompany them. The deputies left with the 2 men. The church waited. Granger was sweating now. Abigail could see it on his forehead, his upper lip, the perfect composure cracking. While we wait, Garrett said, perhaps Mrs. Chen would like to provide her testimony. Margaret stood from where she'd been sitting in the back. She walked to the front slowly, like she was moving through deep water. Mrs. Chen, Garrett said, you operate the telegraph office, is that correct? Yes, sir. And you were friends with Thomas Rowe? I was. Did Mr. Rowe ever discuss his investigation of Mr. Granger with you? Margaret's hands twisted together. He did. What did he tell you? She looked at Granger, then at her daughter, sitting in the second row held by one of Granger's men. My daughter, she whispered, is safe, Garrett said firmly. Mason, bring the girl here. But Mr. Granger said, the guard started. I'm a federal marshal. I outrank Mr. Granger. Bring the child to her mother. Now. The guard hesitated, looked at Granger, then obeyed. Margaret caught her daughter, held her tight, and started crying. Mrs. Chen, Garrett said gently, what did Thomas Rowe tell you? He told me Silas Granger was a thief and a murderer, Margaret said, her voice gaining strength. He showed me documents proving fraud going back 15 years. He asked me to keep them safe in case anything happened to him. Do you still have these documents? I do. Where? Hidden, in the telegraph office, behind a false panel I installed 3 years ago. Granger stood abruptly. This is conspiracy. These people are lying. Sit down, Garrett said, or I'll have you chained. You can't do this to me. I built this town. I own this town. Nobody owns a town, Garrett said, and I think you're about to learn that lesson the hard way. The church doors opened. The deputies returned carrying boxes. Sheriff Doyle and Mayor Pritchard came behind them, their faces grim. Marshal, Doyle said, you need to see this. They spread documents across the altar. Ledgers, contracts, letters. Garrett studied them, his expression growing darker with each page. This is detailed, he said finally. Very detailed. Forged signatures, falsified debts, bribes paid to territorial officials. He looked up at Granger. Including me. Those are forgeries, Granger said desperately. Someone planted them. They're in your handwriting, on your letterhead, filed in your personal safe. Garrett's voice was cold now. Silas Granger, I'm arresting you for fraud, corruption, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. You can't prove murder. Maybe not yet, but I can prove the rest. And once we start digging, once people start talking, Garrett gestured to the crowd. How many deaths in this town have been labeled accidents? How many business rivals have disappeared? How many people who opposed you wound up dead or ruined? The room erupted. People started shouting, some in anger, some in fear, years of suppressed fury boiling over all at once. Order, Garrett bellowed. I need order. The noise died down slowly. This assembly is concluded, Garrett said. Mr. Granger will be held in federal custody pending trial. Boone Callahan and Abigail Rowe, he paused. The charges against you are dropped, with prejudice. Someone started clapping. Then another person, then another. Within seconds, half the church was applauding. Abigail stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Garrett's men moved to arrest Granger. He backed away, hand moving inside his coat. Don't! Garrett warned. Granger pulled a derringer, small and silver. I will not be taken, he said. I will not be paraded through this town in chains like a common criminal. You are a common criminal, Boone said. Just one who had money. Granger pointed the gun at him. The shot came before Abigail could scream, but it wasn't Granger who fired. Sheriff Doyle stood with his service revolver raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Granger looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, surprised. You shot me, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. You were about to kill a man, Doyle said quietly. I'm still the law here. That's still my job. Granger crumpled, fell, hit the floor hard. Someone screamed, then more screaming, people surging forward, chaos erupting. Abigail found herself against the wall, Boone's body shielding hers, his hands, no longer bound, holding her steady while the church descended into madness. A doctor pushed through the crowd, knelt beside Granger, checked for a pulse. He looked up at Garrett and shook his head. Silas Granger was dead. The man who'd ruled Cedar Hollow for 15 years was dead on the floor of the church where he'd sold women like livestock. Abigail felt nothing, no satisfaction, no grief, just emptiness. Come on, Boone said quietly. Let's get out of here. They walked out of the church into cold sunshine. The street was full of people, word spreading fast. But they parted for Boone and Abigail, staring but not hostile. Some even nodded respect. What now? Abigail asked. Now we get our horses. We go back to the cabin. We figure out what normal looks like. Boone's hand found hers. If that's what you want. Is it what you want? I want you safe. Everything else is negotiable. They were halfway to the livery when someone called Abigail's name. Margaret Chen ran toward them, her daughter in tow. Thank you, she gasped. Thank you for not giving up. For fighting. You're the one who kept the evidence, Abigail said. You're the hero here. No, you are. You and him. Margaret looked at Boone. You saved her. Saved all of us, maybe. She saved herself, Boone said. I just gave her space to figure that out. Margaret pressed something into Abigail's hand. A key. Your father's store, it's yours now, the debt's void. Granger forged it, so it was never legal. You can sell it, keep it, whatever you want. She smiled. But I think your father would want you to have it. Abigail closed her fingers around the key. Thank you. They retrieved their horses and rode out of Cedar Hollow for what Abigail thought might be the last time. The mountain trail felt different now. Not like running away, like going home. The cabin was exactly as they'd left it, smoke still rising from the chimney where Clara must have kept the fire going. The girl came out when she heard the horses, relief flooding her face. You're alive, she said. We're alive, Abigail confirmed. Granger's not. Clara's hand went to her mouth. He's dead? Very, Boone said. You're free. We all are. That night, the three of them sat around the fire while Abigail told the full story. Clara listened with wide eyes, interrupting occasionally with questions. What will you do now? Clara asked finally. I don't know, Abigail admitted. I own a bookstore I haven't seen in months. I have a cabin in the mountains. I have a husband who's not really my husband. She looked at Boone. What do people do when they're free? Whatever they want, he said. That's the whole point. Clara stayed with them 3 more days, regaining her strength. Then she headed north to her sister's place in Helena, carrying letters of introduction from Garrett and enough money from Granger's seized assets to start over. And then it was just Boone and Abigail. They fell back into the rhythm of mountain life, but different now. Lighter. Like a weight had been lifted neither of them had realized they were carrying. One night, sitting by the fire, Boone cleared his throat. We should probably talk about the marriage, he said. Abigail's heart jumped. Okay. It's legal. It's binding. But it was also survival. If you want to dissolve it, head back to town, start over fresh. Do you want that? She interrupted. No. But this ain't about what I want. This is about you having a choice. He looked at her. Real choice. Not an auction. Not running for your life. Choice. Abigail was quiet for a long moment. I could go back to Cedar Hollow, she said finally. Reopen my father's store, live a normal life. Marry someone respectable if anyone would have me. You could. Or I could stay here, in the mountains, with you. Build something different. She met his eyes. Which do you want? I want you to choose for yourself. I am choosing for myself. She moved closer. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you, if you'll have me. Boone's hand cupped her face, rough and warm. I've had you since the moment I walked into that church, he said. Question is whether you really want this life. It's hard, lonely sometimes. There's no going back to who you were before. Good, Abigail said. I don't want to go back. He kissed her then, properly this time. Not for show, not for witnesses, just for them. Outside, wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of snow and smoke and freedom. The snow came early that year, 3 weeks before it should have. Abigail woke to find the world transformed, everything buried under 2 feet of white that made the cabin look like something from a child's storybook. Boone was already up, splitting wood outside with methodical precision. She watched him through the window for a moment, studying the man she'd married in desperation and chosen in freedom. He moved differently now, less like someone carrying the weight of 5 years' exile, and more like someone who'd finally put down a burden he'd forgotten he was holding. She pulled on the heavy coat he'd made for her, real leather lined with rabbit fur, fitted to her body without apology, and stepped outside. We're snowed in, she said. For a few days, probably. Maybe a week if this keeps up. He buried the axe in the stump. You worried? Should I be? We got food, we got water, we got firewood, we got each other. He shrugged. That's all winter is. Surviving until spring while trying not to kill each other from cabin fever. Sounds romantic. It really isn't. But he smiled when he said it. They went inside together. Abigail started coffee while Boone stoked the fire. The cabin had changed over the past months. Small things, mostly. Curtains she'd sewn from fabric they'd traded for in town. Shelves Boone had built for her growing collection of books, a proper bed frame instead of just a mattress on the floor. It was starting to feel less like a hiding place and more like a home. "I've been thinking," Abigail said as she poured coffee, "about the store." "Your father's place?" "My place now." She handed him a cup. "Margaret's been managing it since Granger died. Says business is actually better than before. People want to buy from someone who isn't stealing from them." "You thinking about going back? Running it yourself?" "No." "Yes. I don't know." Abigail sat at the table they ate at every day, the one Boone had built with his own hands. "Part of me wants to. It was my father's dream. But part of me thinks that dream died with him, and trying to resurrect it would just be living in the past." "What does the rest of you think?" "The rest of me is happy here. Happier than I've been in years, maybe ever." She looked at him. "But I also know winter up here is 6 months long, and come March I might feel differently." "Probably will," Boone agreed. "Cabin fever's real. By February you'll be so sick of my face you'll want to walk to California just for a change of scenery. Will you be sick of mine?" "I've been looking at your face since January. Haven't gotten sick of it yet." Something warm bloomed in Abigail's chest. 5 months ago, she'd been standing on an auction block thinking her life was over. Now she was drinking coffee with a man who looked at her like she was worth looking at, in a cabin she'd helped winterize, wearing calluses she'd earned. "What about you?" she asked. "You ever think about going back to town? Opening that furniture shop again?" Boone was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But that was a different man's dream. A man who had a wife and a daughter, and thought he could build something that would last." "You could still build something that lasts." "Maybe. But up here I don't have to pretend to be civilized. Don't have to smile at people who'd sell their mothers for a land deal. Don't have to watch my back every second wondering who Granger's paid off this time." He sipped his coffee. "Though I suppose Granger's not paying off anyone anymore. Marshall Garrett's doing a good job cleaning up the mess. For now, but there's always another Granger. Always another man who thinks money makes him king." "You're cynical." "I'm realistic. World don't change just because one bad man dies. It just makes room for the next one." Abigail wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She'd seen too much to believe in easy, happy endings. The territorial trial had been a spectacle. Granger's crimes laid out in excruciating detail. Dozens of witnesses coming forward, emboldened by his death to tell their stories. The corruption ran deeper than even her father had suspected. Bribed judges, falsified land surveys, murdered competitors. By the time the accounting was finished, Granger's estate owed reparations to more than 40 families. The bride auction system had been outlawed throughout Montana Territory. Sheriff Doyle had been removed from office. 3 territorial officials had resigned in disgrace. It was everything Abigail's father had fought for. But Thomas Rowe was still dead. Sarah Callahan and her unborn daughter were still dead. Clara Webb still woke up screaming from nightmares about the man who'd bought her. Justice didn't undo the harm. It just drew a line and said, "This far and no further." "I got a letter yesterday," Boone said, breaking into her thoughts. "From Margaret, before the snow hit." "What did it say?" He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, handed it to her. Abigail read it twice. "She wants to know if we'd take in a woman," she said slowly. "Mary Thompson. She's running from her husband in Helena, needs somewhere safe to hide." "That's what she's asking." "What did you tell her?" "I didn't. Was waiting to talk to you first." Boone refilled his coffee. "This cabin's small. 1 extra person makes it crowded. 2 or 3 makes it damn near impossible. And if we start taking in runaways, word will spread. We'd have women showing up all winter." "Would that be so bad?" "Depends. You ready to run a refuge for desperate women in the middle of nowhere?" Abigail thought about Clara, about the relief on the girl's face when she'd realized she was safe, about the way she'd slowly stopped flinching every time a man moved too fast. "I think maybe I am," she said. Boone nodded slowly. "Then I guess we better start building that addition I've been planning." Mary Thompson arrived 2 weeks later, brought up the mountain by one of Margaret's contacts. She was 31, thin as a rail, with bruises that were old enough to be turning yellow-green. "Thank you," she said when Abigail opened the door. "You don't know what this means." "I know exactly what it means," Abigail said. "Come inside. You're safe here." Mary stayed through the winter. Then she stayed through spring. By summer, she was helping Boone build the cabin expansion, swinging a hammer with competence born of farm work. "I used to build barns with my father," she explained, "before I married a man who thought women should stay in the kitchen." "You going back to him?" Boone asked. "No, I'm going to Fort Benson. Margaret knows a woman there who runs a boarding house. She's hiring." Mary hammered a nail with 3 precise strikes. "I'm done being someone's property." The second woman arrived in May, then 2 more in June. By the time autumn came again, they'd housed 11 women. Some stayed a week, some stayed months. All of them left stronger than they'd arrived. The cabin grew to accommodate them. What had started as Boone's exile became a way station, a place women could catch their breath and remember they were human beings with choices. Abigail learned their stories. Anna, whose father had sold her to pay gambling debts. Rebecca, who'd been beaten so badly she'd lost hearing in one ear. Josephine, who'd killed her husband in self-defense and run before the sheriff could arrest her. Each story was different. Each story was the same. And each woman who left took with her something Abigail recognized, the knowledge that she didn't have to be what other people decided she was. "You're building something," Boone told her one night. They were sitting on the porch watching stars emerge. Inside, 4 women were playing cards and arguing about the rules. "We're building something," Abigail corrected. "You know what I mean. This thing you're doing, giving women a place to become themselves again, it matters. My father tried to change the system. Look what happened to him. Your father tried to fight corruption from inside a corrupt system. You're doing something different. You're creating a space outside the system entirely, where the rules don't apply and women can just exist." He took her hand. "That scares men like Granger more than any ledger ever could. Granger's dead, but the idea of him isn't. The idea that some people are property, that money makes right, that power means you can do whatever you want." Boone squeezed her fingers. "Every woman who walks out of here free is proof that idea's wrong. That's dangerous." "Good," Abigail said. Word spread. By the second winter, they were getting letters from as far as Wyoming and the Dakotas. Women asking if the stories were true, if there really was a place in the Montana mountains where you could go and not be sold or beaten or traded like livestock. Margaret became their unofficial coordinator, vetting requests, arranging travel, making sure the women who arrived were genuine and not bounty hunters looking for runaways. "You've started something," Margaret told Abigail during one of her visits. "People are calling you the mountain lady, the woman who can't be bought." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You stood on an auction block and now you run a refuge. You were supposed to be property and instead you're freeing other people." Margaret smiled. "Ridiculous is sometimes exactly what the world needs." Not everyone approved. In the spring of the 3rd year, 3 men rode up to the cabin. They wore marshal badges, but their eyes were cold and hard. "We're looking for a woman," the lead man said. "Sarah Garrett. She's wanted for theft and abandonment of marital duties." Abigail recognized the name. Sarah had arrived 2 weeks ago, skeletal and shaking, with cigarette burns on her arms. "Never heard of her," Abigail said. "Her husband says she's here." "Her husband's a liar." The man's hand moved toward his gun. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am." "So is human trafficking, but that's what you're doing if you drag a woman back to a man who's going to kill her." Boone appeared in the doorway behind Abigail, rifle held casual but ready. "Problem?" he asked. The marshals looked at him, looked at each other. "No problem," the lead man said finally. "But if we find out you're harboring fugitives, us it." "You'll what?" Boone interrupted. "Come back with more men? I killed 6 the last time someone tried that. You want to see if I can make it an even dozen?" They left. But Abigail knew they'd be back. Men like that always came back. "We need to be more careful," she told the women that night. "Vet people harder. Make sure we're not leading husbands and bounty hunters straight to our door." "Or we need to stop hiding," Mary said. She'd stayed on as a permanent resident, helping manage the constant flow of new arrivals. "Stop pretending this is secret. Make it official." "How?" "Legal sanctuary. There's precedent. Churches can offer asylum. So can certain institutions." Mary pulled out a newspaper clipping. "I've been reading about women's suffrage movements back east. They're organizing, creating networks. We could do the same. We're not a movement. We're just trying to survive." "Survival is political," Mary said. "Everything is political when you're property fighting to be a person." The conversation sat heavy in Abigail's chest for weeks. Then a girl arrived who changed everything. Her name was Emma. She was 14 years old. She'd been sold to a 40-year-old rancher as payment for her father's debts. I ran away, she said, crying so hard she could barely speak. I ran, and someone told me about this place. They said the mountain lady would help. Abigail held the child, and she was a child, no matter what any legal document said, and felt something crystallize inside her. We need to do more, she told Boone that night. Like what? Like stop being quiet about this. Stop hiding. Start making enough noise that the territory has to listen. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Might as well be dangerous and loud. Boone studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled. You've really changed, you know that? I know, you helped. No, you did that yourself. I just didn't get in the way. They started small. Letters to territorial representatives, documentation of abuse cases, testimony from women who'd been through the auction system. Margaret used her telegraph connections to spread the word. Newspapers picked up the story. Suddenly, the mountain refuge, that's what people were calling it now, was news. Some of the coverage was sympathetic. Most wasn't. Rogue Operation harbors criminals, one headline read. Feminist extremists undermine territory law, claimed another. But some voices supported them. Women's suffrage organizations in the East, progressive politicians, even some religious leaders who argued that the auction system violated basic human dignity. The territorial legislature called hearings. Abigail was summoned to testify. You don't have to go, Boone said. They can't make you. If I don't go, they'll paint us as criminals hiding in the mountains. If I do go, I can tell our side. And if they arrest you, then you break me out. She smiled. You're good at that. The territorial capital was bigger than Abigail remembered, full of buildings that tried too hard to look important. The legislative hall was packed when she arrived, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. The chairman was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the expression of someone who'd smelled something bad. Mrs. Callahan, he began, you stand accused of harboring fugitives, interfering with lawful marriages, and operating an illegal sanctuary for criminals. I stand accused of helping women survive, Abigail said. If that's criminal, I'm guilty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The women you're helping are legally bound to their husbands. They have obligations. They have rights, Abigail interrupted. The right not to be beaten, the right not to be sold, the right to exist as human beings instead of property. The law disagrees. Then the law is wrong. The room erupted, people shouting, some in support, some in outrage. The chairman banged his gavel. Order, Mrs. Callahan, you cannot simply declare laws invalid because you disagree with them. Why not? Men do it all the time. They decide women are property, so it becomes law. They decide we can be sold, so auctions are legal. They decide our bodies belong to whoever pays the most, and suddenly, that's justice. Abigail's voice rose. I'm just deciding something different. I'm deciding women are people. If that's revolutionary, maybe the revolution's overdue. Someone in the back started clapping. Then more people joined. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. The hearing dissolved into chaos after that. The chairman tried to maintain order, but couldn't. People were standing, arguing, the whole room a powder keg of competing opinions. Abigail walked out before they could call a vote. Outside, reporters swarmed her, questions flying like bullets. Mrs. Callahan, do you believe in marriage? I believe in choice. If a woman chooses her husband freely, that's marriage. If she's sold, that's slavery. What do you say to those who claim you're undermining traditional family values? I say traditional family values that include beating women aren't worth preserving. The stories spread. Within a week, Abigail's testimony was being discussed in newspapers across 3 territories. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Death threats arrived by mail. Men showed up at the cabin making threats. One night, someone tried to burn down the new addition. But support came too. Donations, supplies, women volunteering to help. A lawyer from Denver offered to represent them pro bono if the territory tried to shut them down. You've started a movement whether you meant to or not, Margaret said during one of her visits. The question is whether you can survive it. The answer came 6 months later. The Montana Territorial Legislature passed the Women's Protection Act. It outlawed the auction system permanently, established legal grounds for women to leave abusive marriages, created penalties for men who sold female family members to cover debts. It wasn't perfect. It had loopholes. It would take years to enforce properly. But it was something. Your father would be proud, Boone told Abigail the night they got the news. I don't know. He wanted justice through the legal system. I just wanted to survive. Sometimes surviving is justice, especially when the system's designed to kill you. That summer, they hosted 23 women at the refuge. Some stayed a week, some stayed months. Emma stayed 2 years, helping with younger girls, learning to read and write properly, growing into someone who smiled without fear. When she finally left for a teaching position in Helena, she hugged Abigail so hard it hurt. You saved my life, Emma said. You saved your own life. You're the one who ran. But you're the one who was there when I arrived. You're the one who proved life could be different. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm going to do what you did. Help other girls. Make sure they know they have choices. The world needs that, Abigail said. The world needs you. But Abigail wasn't sure that was true anymore. The refuge ran itself now, with Mary managing day-to-day operations and a rotating staff of women who'd stayed on to help. Abigail's role was mostly symbolic, the mountain lady, the woman who couldn't be bought, the story that gave other women courage. Sometimes stories were more powerful than reality. What do you want? Boone asked her one night. They were alone for the first time in months, the refuge temporarily empty between waves of arrivals. Not what you think you should want, what you actually want. Abigail thought about it, really thought about it. I want to open my father's bookstore again, she said finally. Not in Cedar Hollow. Somewhere new. Somewhere I can sell books to women who are learning to read because they finally have permission to learn. I want to help them find stories that show them life can be different. That sounds good. But I also want to stay here sometimes. Keep the refuge going. Be available for women who need this place. She looked at him. Is that crazy? Wanting 2 lives? No crazier than anything else you've done. He pulled her close. We'll figure it out. We always do. And they did. Abigail opened a bookstore in Fort Benson, a small space near the river that smelled like paper and possibility. She spent half the year there, selling books and talking to women about stories and survival. The other half she spent in the mountains, helping run the refuge that had become something bigger than either she or Boone had imagined. The years passed. The refuge grew. Laws changed slowly, pushed by voices that got louder every year. Abigail never forgot standing on that auction block, the humiliation and terror of being sold like livestock. But she also never forgot walking out of Cedar Hollow with Boone, choosing herself for the first time in her life. Both memories mattered, the pain and the freedom, the shame and the strength. You couldn't have one without the other. On her 35th birthday, Abigail stood on the cabin porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Boone sat beside her, his hand warm in hers. You ever regret it? She asked. Buying me? Starting all this? Every day, he said. She looked at him, startled. He smiled. I regret that you needed buying in the first place, that the world was cruel enough to put you on that block, that your father died and my family died and all those women had to run for their lives. He squeezed her hand. But I don't regret you. Never have. Never will. Even when I'm difficult? Especially then. Difficult means you're thinking for yourself. That's what I fell in love with. You love me? Have for years. Thought you knew. I suspected. But it's nice to hear. I love you, Abigail Callahan, the woman who couldn't be bought, the woman who survived the mountain and then claimed it as her own. I love you too, she said, the man who saw me when everyone else just saw a body to be sold. They sat together as darkness fell, watching stars emerge one by one. Inside the cabin, women were laughing, planning their futures, becoming themselves. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and indifferent, caring nothing for human struggles or triumphs. But Abigail had learned something in the years since the auction. The mountain didn't need to care. She'd survived it anyway, had taken its brutal lessons and transformed them into strength. She'd become the thing Cedar Hollow's corrupt elite had feared most, a woman who knew her own worth and refused to be diminished. And every woman who walked through her door learned the same truth. You don't need permission to be free. You don't need anyone's approval to claim your own life. You just need the courage to take the first step and the stubbornness to keep walking even when the path disappears. Abigail Rowe had taken that step on a frozen day in January when a mountain man kissed her in front of a hostile crowd and dared anyone to stop him. She'd kept walking ever since, and she had no intention of stopping now.